The crown sat heavy on my sister's head, but heavier still was the silence in my chest as I watched her accept what should have been mine. She wore white, pure, victorious white, while I stood in the shadows of the auditorium in a dress my mother had called too much. The applause thundered around us, but all I could hear was the hollow echo of my own heartbeat. Valerie's smile was perfect, practiced, the same smile she'd worn in every family photo where I'd been cropped out later. Principal Morrison placed the rhinestone tiara on her blonde curls with reverence, and my sister's eyes found mine across the crowded room. In that brief glance, I saw it, triumph laced with something darker. She knew. She'd always known. That night, walking home alone while my family celebrated at the after-party I wasn't invited to, I didn't cry. I'd learned years ago that tears change nothing. Instead, I catalogued every moment, every small cruelty, filing them away in the vast library of injustices I'd collected since childhood. I didn't know then that this night would be my last in this hollow life. I didn't know that in 6 hours, a truck would run a red light on Marshall Street and everything would go dark. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to where it truly began, not to that accident, but to the years that built the girl who would stand so still in that auditorium, watching her sister steal her crown. I was 7 when I first understood that I was the spare, not the heir. Valerie had just turned 9, and my mother was showing her how to apply her first lip gloss in front of the hallway mirror. I'd wandered over, curious, hopeful, only to have Mother's hand gently but firmly guide me away. "Not yet, Chloe," she'd said, her voice carrying that particular tone of dismissal I would come to know intimately. "Valerie needs to learn these things first. She's the one people will look at." My father never contradicted her. Robert Chen. No, I can't use that name. My father, David Harper, was a successful commercial real estate developer, the kind of man who built strip malls and called it legacy. He loved Valerie with the fierce pride of someone showing off a prized possession. He loved me with the absent affection one might have for a houseplant. Acknowledged occasionally, easily forgotten, the pattern established itself early. Valerie got piano lessons. I was told the budget was stretched. When I won the district science fair in 5th grade, my parents arrived late, stayed briefly, and left early to attend Valerie's choir recital, where she'd sung backup. When I brought home straight A's, the praise lasted 30 seconds before someone mentioned Valerie's B+ in history and how hard she must have worked for it. But I endured. I told myself that love wasn't a competition, that eventually they would see me, really see me. I believed that lie for 11 years. High school crystallized everything. Valerie was a junior when I was a freshman, and she'd already established herself as untouchable. Popular, beautiful, dating Blake Morrison, the principal's son and star quarterback. I was the weird little sister who spent lunch in the library, who wore thrift store clothes because Chloe doesn't care about fashion anyway, who faded into background so effectively that teachers sometimes forgot my name. The Homecoming Queen campaign should have been mine. I'd earned it through 3 years of relentless, invisible work. I'd chaired the Spirit Committee, organised 2 successful charity drives, tutored struggling students for free, and maintained a 4.0 GPA, while working weekends at Rosewood Cafe to save money for a college my parents had made clear they wouldn't fund. I'd submitted my name for nomination knowing, hoping, praying that this one thing might be mine. Valerie wasn't even supposed to run. She'd graduated the year before and was supposedly attending community college, though she rarely went to classes. But when she heard I was nominated, she found a loophole, a rarely enforced rule that allowed recent graduates to participate if they were still enrolled anywhere. My mother helped her register for a single online course. My father made calls to the school board. Blake's father, Principal Morrison, approved her late entry personally. The campaign was brutal in its subtlety. Valerie didn't have to try hard, she just had to exist. Her posters appeared overnight, professionally printed on glossy cardstock. My father's money. Her campaign speech was written by a marketing consultant. My mother's connections. She promised to donate any winnings to charity, a move that made her look generous and me look petty when I couldn't match the offer. She smiled and waved and let everyone project their fantasies onto her blank, beautiful face. I campaigned on substance. I spoke about community, about the real work I'd done, about vision for the future. I told the truth. And in the cruel arithmetic of high school politics, truth weighed nothing against golden hair and a quarterback boyfriend. The night before voting, I'd found my campaign posters torn down, replaced with ones that called me desperate and pathetic. I'd walked through hallways where whispers followed me like smoke. Someone had started a rumour that I'd only helped with charity work to pad my college applications, that my grades came from cheating, that I was jealous of my sister's natural charisma. The rumours all traced back to anonymous sources, but I recognised my sister's particular brand of poison in every word. Voting day arrived with the inevitability of winter. I'd worn my best dress, the blue one I'd saved 3 months to buy, only to hear Mother tell Valerie she looked absolutely radiant while barely glancing at me. At school, I'd watched students cast their ballots, seen the way eyes slid past me to land on Valerie's campaign poster, the one where she looked like sunlight personified. The announcement came during the homecoming assembly. Principal Morrison built the suspense expertly, talking about school spirit and tradition while my heart hammered against my ribs. I'd allowed myself foolishly to hope. When he announced Valerie's name, the applause was deafening. When he asked me to come forward to help crown her, the runner-up's traditional duty, I'd felt something inside me crystallize into ice. That walk across the stage was the longest of my life. Each step felt like walking through water, time stretching and distorting. Valerie's smile never wavered as I approached, but her eyes gleamed with something that looked almost like relief, as if my humiliation was necessary for her happiness. When I lifted the crown, that cheap glittering thing that somehow meant everything, and placed it on her head, I felt the final thread connecting me to this family snap. The after-party was at Blake Morrison's house, a sprawling estate on the hill where the wealthy kids lived. I wasn't technically invited, but I went home instead without needing to be told. My parents had already left for the party, excited to bask in Valerie's reflected glory. The house was empty when I arrived, dark and echoing with the absence of anyone who cared. I sat in my room, still wearing the dress that had gone unnoticed, and stared at my reflection. Who was I? Not the daughter my parents wanted, not the sister Valerie needed me to be. Small, grateful, invisible. I'd spent 17 years trying to earn love through achievement, through service, through disappearing my own needs. And what had it gotten me? Nothing. Less than nothing. I decided then, sitting in that dark room, that I was done. Done trying. Done hoping. Done waiting for someone to finally see me. I would go to college, far away, and I would never look back. This family could keep their golden child and their hollow affections. I would build a life where I didn't have to beg for scraps of belonging. That decision felt like freedom. I didn't know it would be my last conscious thought for a long time. The accident happened at 2:47 a.m. I'd fallen asleep in my dress, exhausted from years of trying, and woken to the sound of my phone buzzing. A text from an unknown number. A photo of Valerie and Blake kissing at the party, captioned, "Your sister looks so happy." Even in victory, she needed me to witness it, to feel it. I don't remember deciding to leave the house. I don't remember grabbing my keys or starting my car. But I remember the drive, the empty streets, slick with October rain, the way the streetlights blurred through tears I'd finally allowed myself to shed. I remember the intersection at Marshall Street, the green light, the sense of moving forward into something new. I don't remember the truck. They told me later, much later, when I could understand words again, that I'd been in a coma for 6 days, that the impact had thrown my small sedan 30 feet, that I'd flatlined twice in the ambulance, that my parents had kept vigil at the hospital, that Valerie had cried beautifully for the nurses, that everyone had been so worried. But when I woke, I didn't wake to this life. I woke to sunlight streaming through a window I recognized. My bedroom window, but different, younger. The posters on my walls were from middle school. My desk held textbooks from freshman year. And when I stumbled to the mirror, heart pounding with confusion and impossible hope, I saw my own face staring back at me. 14 years old, unmarked by the years of systematic erosion I'd endured. The date on my phone, an older model I'd forgotten I'd owned, read September 3rd, 3 years in the past. The homecoming that had destroyed me hadn't happened yet. Valerie was a senior, not a recent graduate. I was beginning high school again, armed with knowledge of exactly how the story would unfold. I sat on my bed, hand shaking, mind racing. This was impossible. This was a dream, a coma hallucination, a dying brain's final fantasy. But my memories were too vivid, too detailed, too painful to be anything but real. I remembered everything, every slight, every betrayal, every moment of erasure. I remembered the accident, I remembered dying, and I remembered, with crystal clarity, exactly how my family had orchestrated my destruction. "Chloe!" My mother's voice floated up the stairs, younger than I remembered, not yet carrying the satisfied smugness of a woman whose favourite daughter had won everything. "Breakfast is ready. First day of high school. Don't be late." I walked downstairs slowly, cataloguing differences. My father at the table reading the newspaper, looking less grey. Valerie pouring orange juice, her beauty not yet weaponized into the perfect performance that would come. My mother humming, happy in her ignorance of what she would become to me. They didn't notice anything different. I was still invisible to them, still the spare daughter who faded into the background. But everything had changed. I had changed. I knew the story now, knew every plot point, every betrayal, every carefully orchestrated humiliation, and I knew exactly what I needed to do. I wouldn't fight Valerie openly. I wouldn't plead for my parents' attention. I wouldn't waste energy trying to prove my worth to people determined not to see it. Instead, I would do something far more powerful. I would become untouchable. That first day of high school, I walked through the doors with a plan crystallizing in my mind. I joined the spirit committee again, but this time I documented everything. Every idea I contributed, every hour I volunteered, every success I engineered. I began tutoring, but I had students sign logs and write testimonials. I started photographing my work, creating evidence of my contributions. More importantly, I stopped seeking my family's approval. When my mother forgot to pack my lunch, I didn't complain. I bought my own using money I earned from extra tutoring sessions. When my father skipped my academic awards ceremony to watch Valerie's volleyball game, I didn't cry. I collected my honours alone and posted the photos to social media, where teachers and classmates saw and commented, building a narrative independent of my family's neglect. I watched Valerie's patterns with the detachment of someone studying a specimen. She was beautiful, yes, but her beauty was all she cultivated. She coasted on charm and my parents' money, never developing substance. Her relationship with Blake Morrison was built on mutual superficiality. He liked how she looked on his arm. She liked his status and connections. It was fragile, though neither of them knew it yet. I began building alliances carefully. I helped Rebecca Torres with calculus. Her father owned the local newspaper. I volunteered at the community centre where Judge Patricia Winters ran youth programmes. I joined the debate team and befriended Aisha Johnson, whose mother sat on the school board. These weren't manipulations. I genuinely helped, genuinely connected. But I was strategic about where I invested my limited energy. Months passed. I maintained my grades effortlessly. I'd already learned this material once. I saved money aggressively, working longer hours at Rosewood Cafe, where Mrs. Henderson appreciated my reliability and began training me in management. I built a life parallel to my family's, overlapping but separate, like a shadow that had gained substance. The first sign that things were different came at Christmas. Valerie received a car, a used Honda, but still a car. I received a gift card to a bookstore. I smiled, thanked them genuinely, and used the card to buy books on business and investing. My mother seemed almost disappointed that I didn't cry or complain. "You're being so mature about this," she said, suspicion lurking in her tone. "I'm grateful for what I have," I replied, and I was. I was grateful for the knowledge of what was coming, for the opportunity to rewrite my story, for the freedom that came from no longer needing their approval. By sophomore year, I'd established myself as someone distinctly separate from my sister's shadow. Teachers knew my name. I'd been elected sophomore class representative. My tutoring service had expanded to include students from neighbouring schools. I'd invested my savings carefully, learning from financial podcasts and library books, turning my cafe wages into a small but growing portfolio. Valerie graduated that spring with mediocre grades and vague plans. She enrolled in community college, the same online course strategy she'd used before, but mostly she dated Blake and shopped with our mother's credit cards. She was drifting, beautiful but aimless, while I was building. Junior year was when everything accelerated. I was nominated for homecoming court, not queen, just court, which was perfect. I accepted the nomination with grace, gave a brief speech about community service, and then withdrew a week later, citing the need to focus on my college applications and my expanding tutoring program. The move surprised everyone. "Why would you withdraw?" my mother asked, her tone suggesting I'd embarrassed her. "Because I have more important things to build," I said simply. "A crown doesn't change your life. The work you do while everyone else is chasing crowns, that's what matters." I saw Valerie's face shift just slightly. She'd expected me to compete, to lose, to give her another victory to savour. My withdrawal had stolen that from her, and she didn't know how to process it. But the real shift came that winter, when my careful documentation and strategic alliances bore fruit. The school board launched a review of academic programs, and several board members specifically requested my input, based on recommendations from Judge Winters and Mrs. Johnson. I presented data I'd been collecting for 2 years, attendance patterns, program effectiveness, student feedback, and my recommendations were adopted almost entirely. Principal Morrison noticed. More importantly, Blake's father noticed that his son's girlfriend's little sister was someone of substance. When he mentioned it to Blake, who mentioned it to Valerie, I saw the first flicker of real concern in my sister's eyes. "You're doing a lot of extracurriculars," she said one evening, her tone attempting casual interest. "Don't you want to, I don't know, have fun?" "I am having fun," I replied, and I meant it, building something real, creating value independent of anyone's validation. That was more satisfying than any party. "Mom says you're never home anymore." "I'm working. Someone has to pay for college." The words hung between us, sharp-edged. We both knew our parents would pay for her continued aimless enrollment anywhere she wanted, while expecting me to fund my own education. I'd accepted it. She apparently expected me to resent it more. By the time my senior year began, I was running on a different track entirely. I'd been accepted early decision to Anderson University. Not Ivy League, but respected, with a full academic scholarship I'd earned through relentless effort and documented excellence. I'd been profiled in the local newspaper for my tutoring program, which now served 40 students. I'd saved enough money for my first year's living expenses. I'd built a life. That's when Valerie decided to run for homecoming queen again. I understood the impulse. She was watching me build something real, something that had nothing to do with her, and she needed to reassert dominance. The homecoming crown was her victory, her moment. By running again through that same loophole, she was telling me, "This is mine. You can't have it." But I'd learned something crucial in my 3 years of rebirth. I didn't want what she had. I didn't need their validation anymore. When homecoming nominations opened, my name appeared on the ballot, nominated by students I'd helped, supported by teachers who'd watched me grow, endorsed by community members who'd seen my work. I didn't campaign. I didn't make posters or give speeches. I simply continued doing what I'd been doing, showing up, helping others, building value. Valerie campaigned like her life depended on it. New posters every week, glossy and professional. Campaign promises that sounded increasingly desperate. She'd even convinced Blake, who'd graduated 2 years ago and now worked at his father's car dealership, to appear in her campaign materials, as if his fading high school glory could transfer to her. I watched it all with distant interest, like observing weather patterns. 2 weeks before voting, I did something unexpected. I called a press conference, or rather, Rebecca Torres' father did at my request. I stood in front of local media and announced the Chloe Harper Community Initiative, a scholarship fund I'd established using my savings and contributions I'd solicited from local businesses. The fund would support students like me, academically strong but financially unsupported, with their college expenses. The announcement made the newspaper's front page. More importantly, it made clear what I'd been building all along. Not a campaign for validation, but a legacy of substance. Principal Morrison called me to his office the next day. He was older now than in my first timeline, closer to retirement, and something in his face suggested he saw the game being played. "Miss Harper," he said carefully, "your initiative is admirable. Thank you. Your sister is also running for homecoming queen." "I'm aware." This announcement, the timing might be seen as strategic. I met his eye steadily. "Sir, I withdrew from homecoming court as a junior because I had more important work to do. This initiative is that work. If the timing seems strategic, perhaps that says more about what we value than about my intentions." He studied me for a long moment. "You've changed significantly since freshman year." "I've grown up," I replied. "Sometimes that means learning what actually matters." He dismissed me with a thoughtful expression that suggested I'd said something worth considering. Voting day arrived with the familiar sick feeling in my stomach. Sense memory from my first life, when this day had broken something fundamental in me. But I wasn't that girl anymore. I wore a simple black dress I'd bought with my own money, styled my hair myself, and walked into school with my head high. The assembly had the same energy as before, excitement, anticipation, teenage drama magnified to operatic proportions. Principal Morrison gave his speech about tradition and school spirit. He announced the court, and then, with a slight smile that might have been approval, he announced the winner. "This year's homecoming queen is Chloe Harper." The applause started slowly, then built to something genuine. I walked to the stage in a daze, not because I was shocked, I'd known this might happen, but because I was feeling something unexpected. Nothing. No triumph, no satisfaction, no vindication. Just a quiet recognition that this crown, which had meant everything in my first life, meant almost nothing now. Principal Morrison placed the tiara on my head, and I looked out at the crowd. Found my parents in the audience, their faces frozen in confused surprise. Found Valerie standing near the back, her expression caught between disbelief and something that looked almost like rage. And I felt pity. She'd built her entire identity on being the golden child, the beautiful one, the winner. She'd needed me to be small so she could feel large. And now, without even trying to compete with her, I'd proven that substance outlasted shine. I gave my acceptance speech off the cuff, thanking the students who'd supported me, the teachers who'd challenged me, the community that had embraced my initiative. I didn't mention my family. I didn't need to. The after-party was at Rebecca Torres' house this time, a celebration organised by people who actually wanted me there. I went, wore the crown for photos that would run in the newspaper alongside the scholarship story, and then quietly placed it on a shelf where it would collect dust. It had served its purpose, not as validation, but as visible proof that merit could triumph over manipulation. What I didn't expect was the unravelling that followed. Valerie didn't attend the after-party. She'd left the assembly immediately after the announcement, Blake trailing after her with visible confusion. My parents had approached me briefly afterward, my mother's congratulations sounding more like accusations, my father's handshake perfunctory. They didn't understand what had happened, how their invisible daughter had suddenly become visible to everyone but them. The answer, of course, was that I'd always been visible. They'd simply chosen not to look. The weekend after homecoming, I came home to find my mother waiting in the kitchen, her face tight with an emotion I couldn't quite name. "We need to talk about your scholarship fund," she said. "What about it?" "You didn't tell us you were doing this. You didn't ask permission." "I'm 18. I don't need permission to use money I earned." "It's embarrassing, Chloe. People will think we don't support you financially." The irony was so thick I almost laughed. "You don't support me financially. That's not a secret." "That's not fair. We've provided for you. You've provided housing and food, which is the legal minimum for a parent. Everything else, my clothes, my school supplies, my college applications, my savings, I've paid for myself. The scholarship fund makes that clear to everyone. If that embarrasses you, maybe examine why." My mother's face flushed. "Your sister is very upset." "About what?" "About everything. This whole situation. You've been different lately." "I've been present," I corrected. "I've been building something. If that's different from being invisible, then yes, I suppose I have." My father appeared in the doorway, drawn by the raised voices. "What's going on?" "Your daughter," my mother said, the emphasis making clear which daughter she meant, "has created a scholarship fund without consulting us, and now she's being disrespectful." "I've been honest," I said calmly. "There's a difference." My father sighed, the sound of a man who didn't want to deal with conflict. "Chloe, your mother and I have always treated you and your sister equally." "Stop." The word came out harder than I intended, but I couldn't listen to that lie again. "We both know that's not true. We've all known it for years. But here's what's different now. I don't need it to be true anymore. I've built a life independent of your approval. I have scholarships, savings, community support, and a future I've created myself. Whether you choose to see that or not doesn't change the reality of it." The silence that followed was vast. "Ungrateful," my mother finally whispered. "Realistic," I replied. "There's a difference there too." I left them in the kitchen and went to my room. The room I'd be leaving in 9 months when college started. I felt no triumph in the confrontation, no satisfaction, just a tired recognition that some relationships couldn't be saved because they'd never been real to begin with. But Valerie wasn't done. The unravelling began subtly. Rumours started circulating at school that I'd plagiarised my scholarship application, that I'd manipulated students into supporting me, that the community initiative was a scam. They were crude attempts, easily disproven, but they revealed desperation. Then came the more direct assault. Someone, and we all knew who, even without proof, sent an email to the scholarship committee questioning my eligibility, claiming I'd lied about financial need since my parents were wealthy. The committee dismissed it after reviewing my documentation, but the attempt stung. Blake Morrison broke up with Valerie 2 weeks after homecoming. She'd apparently spent their last date ranting about me, and he'd finally seen the ugliness beneath her beautiful surface. She blamed me for that too, as if I'd somehow orchestrated it rather than simply existed. My mother tried to mediate, calling a family meeting, where Valerie tearfully accused me of sabotaging her life. I listened to the litany of grievances. I had stolen her moment, embarrassed the family, turned people against her, and felt only weariness. "Valerie," I finally said, "I didn't take anything from you. You never had it to begin with. The crown, the respect, the community support, those aren't things you can steal. They're things you earn. And if you'd spent the last 4 years building something real instead of coasting on looks and manipulation, maybe you'd have what you claim I took. You're bitter, she spat. You've always been jealous of me. I was, I admitted, and saw her eyes widen in surprise. In the past, I was incredibly jealous. You had everything I wanted: parental approval, social status, effortless beauty. But I learned something important. None of that was real. The approval was conditional. The status was borrowed. The beauty will fade. What I've built, knowledge, skills, relationships based on mutual respect, that's real. That lasts. I'm not jealous anymore. I'm just free. My father cleared his throat. Maybe we should all take some time to cool down. No, I interrupted. Let me say this clearly, so there's no confusion. I don't want your approval anymore. Either of you. I tried for years to earn it, and I finally understand. It was never available to me. You chose your favourite daughter long ago, and nothing I accomplished would change that. So, I stopped trying. I built a life anyway, and now you're all upset because my success doesn't fit the narrative where Valerie shines and I fade. But that's not my problem. That's yours. The silence that followed was broken by Valerie's sharp laugh. You think you're so much better than me? No, I said honestly. I think I'm different from you. You measure yourself by how you compare to others. I measure myself by what I build. We're playing different games. You just can't accept that yours isn't the only one that matters. The meeting ended without resolution because there was nothing to resolve. We weren't a family working through conflict. We were strangers who'd been assigned the same house, finally acknowledging what had always been true. The weeks that followed were strange. My parents treated me with cautious politeness, like I was a guest they couldn't quite ask to leave. Valerie avoided me entirely, though I occasionally caught her watching me, with an expression I couldn't quite read, confusion mixed with something that might have been grudging respect, or might have been deeper resentment. I didn't care anymore. I was too busy preparing for my real life, the one that would start in September. The final public confrontation came at the Scholarship Fund's first award ceremony. We'd raised enough to support 5 students in their first year of college, not a fortune, but a start. The ceremony was held at the community centre, attended by donors, recipients, their families, and local media. My parents didn't attend, neither did Valerie. Their absence was noticed, commented on, but I didn't apologise for them. Judge Winters mentioned it to me privately, her expression sympathetic. Family can be complicated, she said carefully. Family is who shows up, I replied. By that measure, I have plenty of family here tonight, she smiled. Yes, you do. The ceremony was perfect. Not because it was flawless, but because it represented something real. 5 students who'd been overlooked, underestimated, or undersupported would have a chance. 5 students wouldn't have to choose between education and survival. 5 students would know someone believed in them. That night, leaving the community centre, I finally felt it. The satisfaction I'd been chasing. Not from winning against Valerie, but from building something that would outlast both of us. Spring semester brought college acceptance letters. My scholarship to Anderson was supplemented by 2 others I'd applied for, the result of my documented community work. I'd be graduating with minimal debt and maximum opportunity. I'd also been offered a management position at Rosewood Cafe for the summer, which would add to my savings. Valerie had been accepted to State University, funded entirely by our parents, with no clear major or direction. She'd moved back home after her brief community college attempt, spending her days scrolling through social media and comparing her life to others. I felt no satisfaction in her aimlessness, only recognition that she'd never learnt to build anything for herself. Graduation arrived with the peculiar bittersweetness of endings. I walked across the stage to receive my diploma, graduated with highest honours, and felt ready to leave, ready to begin, ready to live the life I'd fought to create. My parents hosted a joint graduation party for Valerie and me. Her college graduation and my high school graduation combined to save money, though only I knew the irony of the economy. Relatives congratulated us both, but I noticed the difference in their questions. To Valerie, "What's next for you?" with vague hope. To me, "Tell us about your scholarship," with genuine interest. I told them about Anderson, about my plans to study business and education policy, about the scholarship fund I'd continue running remotely. I told them about the life I'd built and the future I was creating. And for the first time, I saw my parents really listening, really seeing me. It was too late, of course. Their attention now couldn't erase years of absence. But I accepted it gracefully, let them believe we might repair what had been broken, even though I knew better. Some breaks are permanent, some relationships survive only on polite distance. The night before I left for college, Valerie appeared in my doorway. We hadn't spoken directly in months, though we'd lived in the same house, passed in hallways, existed in adjacent spaces. "Can I come in?" she asked. I nodded, curious. She sat on my bed, looking younger than I'd seen her in years. "I don't understand you," she said finally. "I don't understand how you changed." "I grew up," I said simply. "No, it's more than that. You used to..." She hesitated. "You used to want what I had, and then you just stopped." "I stopped wanting what you had," I agreed, "and started building what I needed." "Was it because of homecoming? Because I ran again?" I almost laughed. In my first life, that homecoming had destroyed me. In this life, it had been merely clarifying. "No, it was because I finally understood that your approval, Mom and Dad's approval, none of it was worth what I was paying for it." "What were you paying?" "Myself, my dreams, my dignity, my sense of worth. I kept making myself smaller, hoping you'd all finally see me, and then I realised, if they can't see me at my full size, making myself smaller won't help. So I stopped shrinking." Valerie was quiet for a long moment. "I'm jealous of you now. Isn't that funny?" "It's sad," I said honestly. "Because you could have everything I have. The community support, the scholarship opportunities, the genuine relationships. None of that was unavailable to you. You just chose differently." "I chose to be what they wanted," she said, gesturing vaguely toward where our parents' room was. "And I chose to be what I needed," I replied. "We made different choices. We got different results." She left without another word, and I never saw her struggle quite so visibly again. We'd remained strangers, I knew, connected by biology, but separated by choices neither of us could unmake. I left for Anderson University on a bright August morning, my car packed with everything I owned, which fit comfortably in a compact sedan. My parents stood in the driveway, waving, playing the role of supportive parents for the neighbours. Valerie watched from the window of her room. I didn't look back. College was everything I'd worked for, challenging, rewarding, full of people who valued substance over surface. I thrived in classrooms and study groups, built new relationships based on mutual respect, and continued growing the scholarship fund remotely. By sophomore year, we were supporting 10 students annually. By junior year, 15. I heard about my family through occasional updates. Valerie had dropped out of state university after one semester. She'd moved back home, worked retail jobs she hated, and blamed everyone but herself for her lack of direction. My parents had finally begun suggesting she find her path, which was their delicate way of saying they were tired of supporting her aimlessness. I felt no satisfaction in this news. Valerie's failure wasn't my victory. We were simply living the consequences of our different choices. The crown, the physical object, I'd given to the school to display with a plaque acknowledging the scholarship fund. It sat in a trophy case, a symbol of something that had mattered briefly and then faded. I never thought about it. What I thought about instead was the real crown I wore, invisible, intangible, but far more valuable. It was woven from every student I'd helped, every alliance I'd built, every small business owner who'd contributed to the scholarship fund. It was forged from independence, self-respect, and the quiet power of becoming untouchable. My sister had stolen a rhinestone tiara. I'd built an empire of goodwill and genuine accomplishment. She'd won a popularity contest. I'd won my freedom. 4 years after leaving for college, I graduated with honours and a job offer from a major education nonprofit. The scholarship fund had expanded to 3 counties. I had friends who knew my story, loved me anyway, and pushed me to keep growing. I had mentors who saw potential I was still discovering. I had a life I'd built entirely myself. The invitation to my college graduation went to my parents, though I didn't expect them to attend. They'd missed most of my significant moments, and I'd stopped expecting them to suddenly change. But when I walked across that stage to receive my diploma, I saw them in the audience, both of them, sitting stiffly but present. Valerie wasn't with them. After the ceremony, my mother approached with carefully maintained composure. "We're proud of you," she said, and maybe she meant it. "Thank you," I said simply, without the need to question her sincerity or dwell on years of absence. "I appreciate you coming." My father shifted uncomfortably. "Your sister wanted to come, but she's going through a difficult time." I nodded, understanding without needing details. Valerie's difficult time was the natural consequence of never developing substance beneath her surface, but I didn't say that. There was no point in cruelty. "I hope she finds what she's looking for," I said, and meant it. Her happiness or unhappiness no longer defined mine. We had lunch together, awkward, punctuated by long silences and careful small talk. They asked about my job, my plans, my life, and I answered honestly, but without the desperate need for their approval that had once driven every word I spoke. Somewhere between appetizers and dessert, I realized I felt nothing but mild fondness for these people who'd raised me, without ever really knowing me. When we parted, my mother hugged me, brief, uncertain, and whispered, "I wish I'd understood you better when you were younger." "You still could," I replied gently. "Understanding doesn't have an expiration date. You just have to choose it." She pulled back, eyes glistening, and nodded. We both knew she wouldn't take that choice. Some patterns are too comfortable to break, even when they cause pain. But offering the possibility felt right, like closing a door gently instead of slamming it. I watched them walk away, 2 people growing smaller in the distance, and felt the last thread of need finally dissolve. I didn't require their validation. I didn't need them to acknowledge what they'd done or failed to do. I simply needed to live my life fully, completely, on my own terms. The job took me to Chicago, far from the small town where I'd been reborn into this second chance. I threw myself into work that mattered, expanding educational access, funding programs for overlooked students, building systems that would help thousands of kids like the one I'd been. The scholarship fund continued growing, now managed by a small board of people I trusted. Sometimes, late at night in my small apartment overlooking the city, thought about that moment in the auditorium years ago, watching Valerie accept a crown that should have been mine, feeling the weight of invisibility press down on my chest. In my first life, that moment had broken me. In this life, it had been just another stepping stone on the path to becoming who I was meant to be. I'd learned something profound in my rebirth. Revenge is exhausting, but growth is liberating. I could have dedicated my second chance to destroying Valerie, to making my parents suffer for their favoritism, to proving myself superior in every visible way. Instead, I'd simply built a life so complete, so fulfilling, that their opinions became irrelevant. The crown Valerie wore that night was rhinestone and plastic, borrowed glory that faded with the music. The crown I wore now was invisible to everyone but me, woven from every choice to value substance over appearance, every decision to build rather than tear down, every moment I chose my own worth over someone else's validation. I didn't destroy them. I outgrew them. My victory was never about revenge. It was about becoming untouchable, not through walls or distance, but through the quiet certainty of knowing exactly who I was and refusing to be diminished by anyone's inability to see it. On my apartment wall hung a single photo from that homecoming night, not of me wearing the crown, but of the scholarship ceremony that followed. 5 students smiling, holding certificates, their futures suddenly bright with possibility. That image reminded me daily why I'd been given this impossible second chance, not to win a crown, not to prove myself to people who'd never truly see me, but to build something lasting, something real, something that would matter long after everyone had forgotten who wore what tiara to which dance. I'd been reborn into my 14-year-old self with all my memories intact, given the rarest of gifts, a chance to rewrite my story. And I'd chosen to write it in permanent ink, in actions that couldn't be erased, in lives touched and futures changed. My sister stole my homecoming crown, so I built a kingdom instead, one she could see but never enter, admire but never claim, recognize but never understand. And in that kingdom, I finally learned to wear the only crown that ever mattered, the one I placed on my own head.